Todd is a transformational leader with a real edge on experience. He's known for his productive disruptor mindset. He turned his company upside down to focus on one single thing: growth. With over a decade of experience and expertise in customer, product marketing, and advertising, he has a laser focus on the customer, ensuring that business and digital transformation are customer-centric. He's serving as the Chief Experience Officer at the AMA, the American Medical Association. They drive initiatives that blend product marketing, e-commerce, community, and service to boost membership. And he's also the author of the 10-Second Customer Journey, a playbook on customer experience. And he's offering a groundbreaking step-by-step framework that redefines the way businesses approach customer interactions. So today, we have Todd here to dig into the ways companies can use as a blueprint for success, but we're going to go deeper on many of these topics, and I can't be more excited to have you on. Todd, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
I want to start with business impact because you were on one of the webinars at Dado, and we talked about your book, we talked about the concepts, but I want to make it practical. I want to make it real, and I want to talk about growth first. So can we talk about business impact and start maybe with like what growth means for you at the AMA? And let's get specific. Like when you started, where you are today, like how have you grown your organization in whatever you want to define growth by?
I love that question because that's what it's all about. If you looked at the book, you know that the point of customer experience in my mind is growth. People talk a lot about feelings and perceptions, but I think to really get traction on CX, we need to speak the language of growth. You mentioned I work for the American Medical Association. Just for folks out there that are not familiar with that, we're the largest association representing physicians, residents, medical students in the U.S. I think worldwide, healthcare is always got problematic issues, and physicians need people to represent them, and that's the work we do. And my job, when I got brought in 7.5 years ago, was to make sure that our membership was growing. That's a challenge, I think, not just for our organization, but for associations in general. This kind of decade has not been necessarily kind of kind to people joining and looking for an association relationship. I'm very pleased to say we are at really a 20-plus year high in terms of membership. And it's been growing. I think we've had 11 of 12 years of growth. And so mine has been approaching 8 years of that have been in my tenure. So I'm very proud of what the team has achieved. And I would say it's a total organization win and effort to make that happen. There's a lot that goes into growth, as you know. And for me, the pivotal part of this was figuring out what experience meant in the growth formula and how to translate that into an actual plan. And I think that's maybe something we can cover in the next question or so.
So let's do it. And define growth a little bit more. Is it like single digit growth year on year? Are we talking double digit growth? Like you had some growth in the beginning, you said, and then you came on board. Did it accelerate? Like just to give the listeners a little bit of a sense of what we're talking about numbers wise and the rate of growth.
Yeah, just for a perspective, we're a 175 plus year old organization. We are not a startup with a substantial membership base. So we're not in that, 50%
triple,
mode.
double. No.
But it's funny because I worked in publishing before this, and a lot of the same kind of mechanics operate. So in terms of like growth expectations and retention and things like that, pretty much the same formulas apply to subscription operations like membership. And so for us, we are looking for consistent year-over-year growth across all our segments, and we treat physicians, residents, students as separate. We have institutional programs, like if you look on for health systems and residents and students that contribute that as well and are kind of newer on that front. But I think the key thing is I came in with a digital background, and they were specifically looking for someone with that skill set. I did not come from healthcare. I came from horse racing, so very different perspective. What I quickly realized was that the experience that most of the nearly 300,000 members of this organization was going to have was going to be digital. And I just returned from a week with our House of Delegates, which is kind of like Congress of doctors that work on health policy, very influential, very powerful group. But that's, let's say 1,000 just for ballpark figures. What about, that other 280,000 folks? What's their experience going to be? And that's going to be digital. And that has really been the growth engine, I think, for us over the past 7 years.
So there was nothing digital when you started? Was that specifically when you started shifting things around? Or was there already a groundswell and things are moving in the right direction? There is a definite need for the AMA to exist and people are actively becoming members? Or was it a necessary change to put you in a position to help them accelerate their growth using digital tools and platforms and solutions for your members?
I think the biggest change, and this is kind of a key point that I talk about in the book because it was inspired by being here, which is when you look at the kind of four corners of experience, marketing, product, commerce, and service, when those things are all working together and in tandem, then that's when you see growth. But I think I just described in general terms when I started here that they were not necessarily aligned. So I came in as responsible for membership. But as we began to look at where the growth levers are, the website, the editorial and content operations, social media, the advertising campaigns were handled in a different place. And so it becomes very hard to generate membership if there's not a button on the website that says join now. And so what became apparent over the course of time was these pieces of the digital engine, while they might have existed before, were not knit together in an experience that led to engagement and ultimately to membership. And so a lot of the work that's been done over the past 7 years has been pulling that together. And that's why I think I talk to a lot of people and I say, a lot of times people tend to try to go outside and get things to fix, but look inside and look to see that the growth levers of your own organization are operating in unison, because the likelihood is they're not. They're probably in separate silos and different bosses and different objectives. And until there's a common understanding of an enterprise level metric and a way to knit together those different parts of the growth engine, it's going to be very hard to achieve.
So you were hired to set all this up, the foundation, making sure that the growth engine starts to work. You accidentally became the CXO, Chief Experience Officer. How did that come to be? And I know that people are listening to this and saying yeah, I can relate to this. We are still siloed, even though we've been past the digital transformation where now everything is digital. We're agile. We're doing all these things, but still things are not right. It would be great if we can bring someone in that ties everything together. But my company is not doing that, and we have to figure it out on our own. So you came in, probably not as the CXO, but turned yourself into that. How did that come to be? And what would you say to companies struggling with the same thing? How would you apply that to them?
Yeah, so just the way that it worked is I did come in, and that was the title, Chief Experience Officer, but the definition of it, I would say, was kind of purposely left open to evolve. And there was a separate CMO at the time, and so the kind of, as I mentioned before, that the responsibilities were kind of spread out. And I would just say there wasn't necessarily a universal focus on membership and on what I would call being customer focused. So that's a lot of kind of that work. I'd say in some respects, even though supposedly 90% of U.S. organizations have a CXO or its equivalent, I found out, and that's one of my initial frustrations and motivations for writing the book, was nobody knew what that meant. They don't know what experience means. I certainly don't know what a chief experience officer is supposed to do. And that's why I always say to people, it doesn't matter how many C-level executives you bring in, you can call them whatever you want. At the root of the problem is the same one that everybody is facing, which is a need to grow and an inability to kind of get the machine working together. And it's not just naming another executive, it's actually rethinking organizational structures, responsibilities to unify the growth engine. That's what's got to be done. And it's hard for a new person to walk in the door and do that. It definitely takes time and the support of, the most senior leaders in an organization all the way up to the CEO to make that happen.
So when you talk about member growth being like the one thing that matters and that you need to design the machine and the experience and everything around to fuel that growth engine, it sounds very logical, but I can imagine it wasn't that obvious that when you joined that was supposed to be the thing that would need to be happening. You mentioned all these fragmentation across tools, across platform, across different parts of the organization. And then we have a dysfunctioning team where parts of that were covered, other parts weren't. Like, how do you get to work? Like, what was your first order of business? Like, how did you start uncovering that? Was it known that, okay, it's all about member growth, that's the North Star, let's go? Or how did that take shape? And what did you do first? Like, you can't fix everything at day one.
And it's funny because I talk a lot about this to folks who will ask me about digital transformation or kind of big picture stuff. And I'm like, I never start without those words or talk big picture about customer experience. It's just about doing the work. And here's a great example. I walk in, I'm like in week 1, and the trend is not looking good. I have to figure out some changes to make. And one of the first things I started looking at is our email program. There had been a piece of research done by an outside firm that said it took us 47 days from I want to send out an email to push the button and send out the email. How can it possibly take 47 days? So I started looking and digging into that. Well, look at all the different groups that are involved in the conception and production and the distribution of the email. And it cut across different teams at the AMA and many different parts of my own team. And there was just not a solid understanding of how an email marketing program should work. Not templates that work, no testing of subject lines, no nothing. So one of the first things I did was I sat down with our designer, and the two of us reworked the template. And I offended like a lot of people because I broke brand guidelines and all this kind of stuff. But I'm like, listen, they don't work. And the job is to create numbers through this. And so right off the bat, we tested one against the other. And guess what? The redesigned template was 40% better than the other one. And so I made a change. And I said, this is how the new system is going to work. I'm sorry about cutting certain people out of this, but that's not what this is supposed to be about. And we went from 47 days to 8 days and one change. People could be unhappy about that. No one likes to be disinvited to the party, but it's like so many things. When there's this kind of dysfunction in an organization and you can't get things done easily, people don't feel good about it. It makes their lives miserable. And so to remove that sense of misery from the process was very freeing for people, and they liked it. And so on balance, it turned out to be a very positive change. And then we just kept working from there. Now we can develop and send an email out in an hour, like it should be. That just took rolling up your sleeves, really understanding what the process is, have a very clear vision of what the metric is on something like that, and getting it done. Now you add that to the improvements that we made in digital processes, initiatives across the board over a period of 5 years, then you can look back and say, we've been through a digital transformation. You didn't scare anybody. You just proved yourself. You proved it all along the way that these were necessary changes to how you operate, to use digital tools and drive growth. And I didn't have to use big words or anything.
I love this example. And I think it's a really good one also for a lot of people listening, that you as the CXO, sitting down with the designer, making that change also showed like a little bit of pragmatism on the first day, on the first week, that is not necessarily in a lot of like organizations where there's inertia, something that people naturally take on. But seeing you do it, I can only imagine that is sparking also some energy for others to say, hey, we can think differently about things. And sometimes it has to start bottom up the way you do it, but your title is indicating like you're a C-suite executive. So that is something worth noting. And I can only relate to this in a different way, where once I was designing email templates for one of the biggest corporates in the world. I was a designer, and I spent like 80% of my time meeting people, polishing a tiny bit, where the initial version was like a step change to where they were, but it took me like 80% more of that whole project to get anything done. If you think about the time and money spent on this simple thing. I can only imagine that it was similar to what you're saying, and a lot of companies are facing, like changing a word on the homepage. Like you get to jump to 50 different hoops and you can't do it. And by the time you want to change it, it's irrelevant.
I'd say the biggest thing that email example kicked off was building a culture of testing and experimentation, which was not necessarily innate in the group here. And I think a lot of people are still kind of afraid or not equipped to do that. But it does unleash a change culturally. I remember a bunch of years ago, another group, like our organization was like, "You're moving too fast." And we're like, this is the kind of urgency that you have to move with in today's marketplace, where you can learn whether something's working or not very quickly and then make a change based on that. But you have to be pretty nimble to do that.
So you mentioned your work triggered at some point you writing your 10-second customer journey book. Do you remember where you were, where you went like, okay, I gotta codify what I know, what I'm seeing, what I'm doing. I gotta do this? Or was this more like you got pulled into it by something else? Like, what was the trigger for you to say, okay, I'm gonna do this?
There are a couple of things. I think one, I started publishing on LinkedIn 10 years ago when they first started that, and started kind of recording my philosophy and started practicing it. And believe it or not, there are things that I was able to mine directly from what I had written. I didn't know it at the time that I was starting to build a philosophy about how marketing should work, and Expereience. That wasn't even in my lexicon then. But fast forward to this role, it's in my title, Expereience, and we don't have a customer experience strategy or even a person when I first started. And so I sat down with our customer service director, and I said to her, "I'm repositioning you as our customer experience director, and I want you to help me figure out how do we answer the question of what our customer experience strategy is, and let's build that together." That's what set this kind of in motion as we started to think through those. And I started to struggle with, like, how do I true up with all of the things that I'm reading in the world of customer experience and philosophy around that with the other worlds that I come from and toward the end that I'm looking for, which is growth. And what I found through that process as I started to get into it was just feeling kind of like the answers weren't there that I was looking for. There's been a lot of great work in the world of customer experience, and I've gotten to meet a lot of those leaders who have developed that philosophy. But, after digital entered the picture, I don't think we had that same level of advance after that to kind of redefine what operations and organizations need to do to develop and deliver customer experience in a world that's very, very different than it was in the mid-90s when that term was developed originally. That's what set me off. And I, like anything, you start writing and the direction starts to change a little bit. And that's when the kind of idea of the playbook came together. But if you want to know a funny story about how it actually happened, I mentioned to my wife as part of a New Year's resolution that I wanted to write a book. And she sent me a link to a book proposal challenge that was offered by a publishing firm in the UK. And I just enrolled in it as a lark. It was 10 days to a book proposal. And at the end of that, I was like, this is not so bad. And then it won. And I got a publishing deal with Practical Inspiration Publishing in the UK. And all of a sudden there's an agreement. And a month later, my book is on Amazon available for pre-order. And I haven't even put pen to paper. So it's funny how things come together. And I would just say, and I encourage my team, that's why publishing and being a thought leader is so important, because you're building your bank of thought leadership that you can draw on later.
I can only imagine the pressure you felt the moment you won and that book launched in the Amazon store and you didn't have anything on paper yet. It's also nice to have a deadline because all of a sudden you're moving. What I want to do is I want to do something fun. I'm going to take the book. There's a 7-step framework, right? Roughly that the book is about. We're not going to spoil all the details. I still recommend people to check it out for themselves. But here's what I want to do. I want to take those 7. I'm going to read them out loud. And one by one, I want to go through them And I don't want to do the obvious. So one of the examples is, the first one is define the target customer. And that I think everyone knows that is important. But what I want to do for each of these is actually hear from you how you got it done. And not necessarily like, oh, we interviewed customers, we went to them. No, internally. Like, what were the decisions? Who was involved? When was it done? When would you agree on like, okay, this is the target customer? So I want to take the internal perspective of you taking your team, your organization by the hand. And I'm sure we're going to talk about creating new teams, changing roles for people, like you just said, with your support leader and redefining this. But I really want to take the internal focus on like, okay, sure, we say we want to target the customer, but that means like we need to rally the entire organization around that. So I'm curious if you're up for it, for these 7.
Yeah, sounds great.
If we can dig into that part of how to execute. All right.
That's perfect.
Let me read them out first,
right.
all 7, so that people have an idea of where we're going, and then we can dig in one by one. You ready? The first one is define the target customer. The second one, create a compelling brand proposition. The third one, develop a product that delivers on the brand promise. The fourth, build a strong storytelling platform. The fifth, streamline the commerce process. The sixth, establish a test and learn culture. The seventh, eliminate friction across customer touch points. And these are the 7 we're going to go through. Todd, is this the right order? Do you want to take them in any different way? Now you know a little bit more and the book's out and everything is different.
No, that's perfect. Let's do it.
All right. We're going to take the internal perspective of what you needed to do to get it done. And well, my listeners, everyone in large organizations that want to do these things or need to change these things, like they will be listening with like, what are the steps I need to take? Who do I need to involve? What are decisions? When is it done? So let's start with define the target customer.
That's great. I would just say, for starters, every advance I've ever made across my career started with a redefinition of the target customer. And I know that sounds very strange. And even for organizations that have been around for a long time, there are so many improvements that are made if you can understand your customer in the right way, which I call a 4D view. So you have to understand what they do, how they feel, how they relate to your product. And then fourth and last is demographics. And so I learned that a long time ago, early in my career, and I literally have executed this play over and over again, and with varying levels of resources at my disposal. I've done everything from pre-internet, pre-digital work, where it was people filling out diaries, to bigger research things, to doing my own SurveyMonkey questionnaires, to having bigger firms. And so I just want to set it there. This is not like a thing you need $1 billion to do. But the ultimate thing is you need a segmentation that's driven by data that helps you see your customers in 4D. So when I got here, I think people just kind of talked about kind of everything like in a big blob. Like you talk about physicians in one big group or the market. And you can always tell in any organization that I talk to, if they they'll say that their target audience is based on certain demographics, or they'll say it's everyone. That's the most thing I probably hear the most. Everybody wants this. Or all I need to do is get 5% of that and I can be successful. Or, my target is busy moms, which is pretty generic and kind of a stereotype. There's just a classic thing. I call them fake personas. They're just not real or based on data, and they're not predictive of what the outcome is that you're seeking. And so I started working on my team with this, and we started Scrappy, and our email team started to analyze open rates and click-through rates on our email, and they did a very, very simple bucketing based on their just on intuition and kind of trial and error, and they bucketed kind of 3 kinds of emails that we sent out. Some that were about healthcare advocacy, some that were about the science and the research part, and then some that were about practice management and practice improvement.
Sorry that I interject here, but did you get a mandate from, let's say, your CEO to redefine the target customer, or was that your experience, say like we need a better profile to go after? Was there like a mandate necessary, like you just did it, or how did that start? Because sometimes starting is the hard part? Sorry to interject. Like, I'm curious, and then please continue with your...
I don't know. Maybe if you're like in a really small company, that might happen, but I would never expect my CEO to come to me and say like, you need to rethink your target audience. Like, that's just not, that's my job, just to kind of be, you're knocking on every door trying to look for growth. And to me, it's always the first play in that. And like, there's nothing more that I like to take to my CEO is like new thinking that challenges kind of what the status quo was and how we used to approach things, and then to show the CEO how that translates into new business. And that's the job if you're a marketer or anybody in this line of work. For us, going through that the thing that I recognized like early on, just my intuition, little bells would go on, is like we would have certain things about our email we wanted to send out, and some people were like, we can't send that out. Maybe that's too controversial, or why are the open rates on this one so low, or unsubscribed so high on this? It's kind of because we were sending everything to everybody. And once we realized that there were these three distinct groups of users, we immediately said, let's start to target email based on what those content groups looked like. We later then took that model and went to an outside firm, and they validated it. It statistically was correct, and that formed the basis of our first segmentation, which, we were able to eventually combine with other things like, you've got member, non-member, you've got new people, you've got somebody who did not renew last year, you've got people that are engaged with the website and not engaged, and there are all sorts of combinations. It's rarely like one segmentation, but you can kind of pile them on top of each other. Then we got very fancy down the road, and I used this 4D model to do one that was built from scratch. This is a thing like you can really, I would say, of all the skills you can develop in your career, is one of the most valuable is you learn to create research that will deliver you a 4D segmentation view.
And again, so we remind people of the 4 dimensions that go into the segmentation view. Like, what are the 4?
So first of all, that D, the big D is for data, and the rest of them, it's like basically what do people do? And so look for behaviors associated with your target audience. It may be category related or it might not be. Second is, what do they believe and how do they feel about things? So many things affect people's perceptions of products that are not product related. I mean, that's why, ketchup is political. I mean, you just don't know how people make up their minds and process things about your brand. And so it's important to cast a wide net there. Then introduce things about your product into the equation so you can link the first 2 categories to beliefs about your product. And then finally, collect all the demographic information. It's rarely the driver of the outcome, but interesting trends can appear as part of that. But again, I always stress to people, I may have somebody who is, half my age and into weightlifting or horseback riding, and I'll have more in common with them on those, in that arena than I would with somebody who's my own age. So, that's the kind of connection that you're looking for. And if you can do studies like that, and especially this is where it does help to have an outside firm who is good at statistical modeling and can identify things that might not be apparent with the naked eye. And lo and behold, it's very weird, and it's happened over and over again in my life, is people sort themselves into groups, and they're really different from each other, and their perception of your product very different from each other. What they need, want, how they think, why they join, buy, not, very different. And once you have an understanding like that, it unlocks customer experience because everything flows from that.
How did that initial conversation with the CEO go, where you presented something new, said, hey, look, new data, here's actually who our customers are? Was it, all right, Todd, green light, fantastic, let's go? Or were you challenged? Like, what is that conversation like? How did it go?
I'm trying to remember back to this. The concept of segmentation is not new. I will say there was a fancy firm, a decade or more before me that had a segmentation, and it was something to the effect of like joiners and not joiners. It is not really a very insightful segmentation. It doesn't really get to the why. And so that concept, I think people kind of, knew was out there. The reception to this, both internally with our board, with members, as I've kind of taken the story out there, to be one of great appreciation and perhaps surprise at how different their colleagues and our customers are from each other and why certain approaches might work and not. It's kind of like a little bit of a Rosetta Stone. It's like, oh, now I understand, and here's what we can do about that. And I think the key thing always with targeting is people are very afraid to say who kind of is in the prime, kind of the sweet spot, and those that aren't. But that's a necessary thing that you have to do when you're in marketing because you have limited resources. It's like, who are we going to focus on first? Where do we think the other growth segments are? And then how do we want to approach that? And the strategy comes from there.
One of the things I love to do is creating anti-personas. And typically when there's no data, people actually like to market people like them. So we saw a lot in organizations where there wasn't good work done on like the target customer, that personas were lookalikes of the marketing teams, of the brand teams, of the teams that are working. And then creating those anti-personas usually were a reflection of that team. So that was always like a fun moment where we started to explain that. So yeah, I know this can be spicy, but when done right, it's like, yeah, duh, like we knew it from all along. So I want to move along in the chapters because I don't want to take you all night here or all day to make this into a 5-hour long marathon. But we do want to deep dive onto these topics. So I'm loving it. Let's go to create a compelling brand proposition. This involves some more people, I can imagine. Like, how do you execute this, and how did that came to be at the AMA at your time?
This is another thing where it does help to have had experience over a number of different brands over the course of my lifetime and actually participated in this process. And again, like this, I look at the CXO role, it's very operational. You got to be in there and you've got to drive this process. Defining your brand and what it stands for, there's nothing more important than that. If you know who your customer is first, and then you can define that. But this is where the art and the science of marketing really come together. I always describe a great brand proposition as like Mr. Spock on Star Trek. It's part logic, the functionality of your product, and then there's the human emotion part, and you have to figure out how to bring those two things together. Because if you just focus on logic, and this is like what I'll call feature-based selling, you see it out there. I said people will pass by that at warp speed. They don't just want to see a list of the things your product does. They need to understand how it fits into their life. And so getting to that insight, that takes time and effort. And it usually starts out through qualitative research and listening to your customers and testing your own intuition about what that might be. You kind of generate a list of ideas and hone them there. And then you take it to quantitative testing and you see if you've got something that stands out. And I was at a conference recently over the weekend, and I told folks, like, what I learned very early in my career is like, if you can't get 60 or 70% of people to say they would definitely or probably buy your product after they read a paragraph about it, don't bother going and making anything because you don't have a proposition. But getting that down on paper is really important. And the change that occurred with the advent of digital marketing is the way that was structured. And believe it or not, it resembles the way that what we used to call copy strategy at Procter & Gamble was. It's 1 line and 3 bullet points, and that's all you get. And you'll recognize that because that's the formula for a landing page in the digital world. People they seem to violate that rule all the time. You'll go to a landing page, there's just like stuff all over the place. They expect people to read and look at detail when they will make their minds up in about 1 second. And if you haven't done that work about who you're talking to or what are the small collection of words that will move them to learn more or buy now, then you're still kind of you're at a dead end.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Expereience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. If you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access, check out the Expereience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation. So you're saying all that were culminated into one headline and 3 bullet points, that was the brand promise that ultimately got thumbs up from your peers in brand?
Yeah.
Your
this
peers
is a classic thing, because I would say one of the things that I faced when I started with the organization, a lot of people, and I talked to a lot of physicians out there, it's just a general lack of awareness of what the organization was doing. And I'm like, oh my God, we're doing all of these amazing things. How can people not know about them? You go around and you would ask people around here, like, what is the AMA? You would generally get a recitation of the mission statement, which is a fantastic mission to promote the art and science of medicine and the betterment of public health. But what that isn't is a brand strategy that it says, what does this organization do for you, target audience? And that was a new concept here. That took a lot of education to try to help people understand the difference between the two, that it was not apart from the mission or in a different direction. It was just a way to say, what's the brand promise? After a lot of work, we came to this idea of the physician's powerful ally in patient care and a set of things underneath that, the 3 or 4 kind of bullet points underneath that. And we tested it. And it turns out that you can describe really, really accurately what this organization does with one line and those bullet points. 90%
so the line was, physicians are
powerful ally in patient
powerful
care.
ally in patient care. Can you give an example of one of the bullet points that sits beneath that?
We speak with a unified voice for medicine. We fight the burdens that get between physicians and their patients. We take care of physicians to make sure that their well-being is served, and we drive the future of medicine. Those were our bullet points, and it accurately kind of described the breadth of the work that goes on here, but it built to one cohesive idea, which is like, despite all the things that you're facing out there in medicine, and believe me, there are a lot of obstacles that doctors face to do a job that they just absolutely love, they need somebody in their corner. And so just emotionally and in a very simple thing, it's like, our latest campaign is called Why We Fight. We fight for patients. We fight for doctors to do their jobs. It's a very simple idea, but it's one that resonates beyond just facts, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. And you talk about nodding, getting a nod from your customers when they hear it, when they say it.
There's nothing better than the physical manifestation of knowing you've achieved the brand proposition, as you will. We just had some focus group with some educators, and we were testing different things, and you can see people physically nod. And that's how you know that you have said something that resonates with their lives and that brought to life how this would fit in.
So you're saying we're spending millions on fancy brand agencies, but all you need is a nod?
I'm going to tell you what. One of the things I love to do is talk about the difference between people that are doing this well and the people that are not. And almost universally, the people that are doing it well are digital brands. I call them, 5 seconds and $5 in their efforts, because you'll see an Instagram feed, it's a little video, and in 5 seconds, you immediately understand what the brand proposition is. They spent nothing to do it, nothing to put it together. And then you compare it to a brand my pet peeve of the year is the Doritos ad at the Super Bowl here, where they cram so much stuff into 60 seconds. They spend $10 million producing the ad, and they spend $10 million on running the ad, and the thing doesn't make any sense. And you can't cut it down to that 5 seconds that people can absorb. You can never go the other way. And so this is it's a classic big brand move. Spend lots of money. Don't pay any attention to the fact that people can't absorb any of that. They don't care that your chip is got corners or not. You're not looking to be bold in a new world. I just want, a better chip. I don't know. Sometimes it just cracks me up. The lengths that people go to.
We have the target customer. We now have a compelling brand proposition, one line, bunch of bullets. So now we get to work, and the next thing is develop a product that delivers on the brand promise. But the AMA exists 175 years, and 7 years ago, a little bit less years, but still almost 2 centuries. So there are products, there are services. What did you do? Did you completely throw everything out of the window and start from scratch? Did you start enhancing? Where did you start to work to tie the product that delivers on the brand promise together?
One of the concepts that I talk a lot about in the book within product is about bundling. This is not, I worked in the past, and one of my pivotal experiences about product was on a plastic container. I mean, that's a thing you can hold and you buy in the store and like you feel it, right? With the AMA, it's not necessarily a tangible thing like that. It is a feeling and a thing you see. And then there are services that we do provide in different areas, like well-being assessments and recognizing people that are doing great work in the world of physician burnout. It's about creating an architecture of, we call it priorities, proof, and people. And that became kind of the architecture of that, which is like part of like our product is people knowing what the priorities of the organization are and then showing the proof that we're doing those things. That's it. That's product in my world. And then there are the tangible things fall in that kind of proof way about the services and that we provide and the wins that we have in advocacy. And then there are, a small thing, a cadre of like actual like member benefits and discounts that we try to make very unique and appealing for physicians, students, and residents. Those are harder to come by these days because everything from your credit card to whatever it is are coming with benefits like that. And so that's a lot more work than it used to be. In every business that you're in, that product conception, and I'm sure you work with a lot of digital businesses where the product is digital and, people on the other end of that would describe it as a product, even though it's not something they can hold.
Right. No, we work at a lot of service businesses, and especially like those in the Fortune 500, where there's a ton of products and services and digital products and physical products and services around the digital and physical products. So it's a mess. It's even more terrible than having a single focus on member growth, that when you're organized in 39 different countries and have different brands and different product lines and different geos to matter, it's hard, but still the same. Deliver on a single brand promise is what all these companies are passionately believing in, but organizing their product portfolio against that is a little bit harder at that skill. But also bundling and unbundling is, you work in cycles, right? You get things together, the all-in-one solution, and we start to unbundle again. There's these like ebb and flow of doing this. When you had your brand promise, did you need to do a lot of rebundling up or down, on or in bundling? Like, what was that like?
The most important thing was figuring out, at this point too, in addition to membership, part of my metrics are, we'll call it brand sentiment, but strength of the brand, an audience for our mission units that do everything from try to solve blood pressure to help physicians and their well-being. What I found over the course of time was it used to be that membership was very separate and it had kind of its own premise and, here's an incentive to kind of get you over the hump. But as time went on and we kind of came to that priorities, proof, and people part, it became very apparent that the success of our mission operations and the proof that they delivered was the basis for membership. And so that made it so much easier to think of it as one thing instead of a bunch of separate things. And within that, if you listen to your customer, there are going to be certain things that are in priority order. And that was a harder thing to do, is to figure out just from a communication standpoint, here are the things that we're going to be stressing. And not, again, it's not a laundry list of stuff. It's we're trying to communicate an idea. And the proof can vary over the course of time, but it's not going to be everything. And so I would call it, the bundling was a lot of prioritization about messaging.
Who was involved in these sessions? Who did you need to make decisions? Can you give some examples of the people that you needed to make this?
This is where you are like someone like me is out making a lot of visits to people up and down and across. Because this is a pretty seismic change within an organization. First of all, have a brand strategy. Second, understand what it is, how it's going to deliver, how it's going to be executed. What's the basis on which you decided what was going to represent proof and not? This was from the top all the way down, and then through every business unit, through the board, everybody kind of coming to agreement. But I would just say as a North Star has become so important to the organization and its identity and becomes kind of an organizer in and of itself that is very customer focused. And so in that regard, just has a lot of positive benefits.
So those meetings, did you went in with like, here's my proposal based on everything I see? Was it more like, I'm going to talk to all these people first to get their perspective? I'm going to layer that onto what our customers are saying. I'm going to do a fancy 100 by 100 matrix and to really like understand how everything is working. But how, like literally, like what did you do? What did you bring to the table to get those people aligned with what you were seeing?
The two biggest pieces of it were, one is we did kind of an enterprise kind of assessment where we did kind of from a marketing standpoint only, basically looking at how are we accruing benefit to the enterprise and kind of scoring that and looking at all the many activities out there that we were doing and trying to figure out, like, based on that rubric, how do we think we should spend our time? And then a separate thing was validating that through research quantitatively to say, like, it's not just our intuition. This is going to drive business. For us, fortunately, also, we gotten a little bit of a head start through testing and have actual business results to show that this approach, we started a membership campaign, which was separate from the brand campaign that was going on at the time, which was, we called it Members Move Medicine. And it basically was like, here are our members telling the world and their colleagues why their membership in the AMA is a positive experience and what it's achieving. And we used the proof that the organization was generating to communicate priorities and answer that question. Well, I don't know what you're doing. And that started to get traction, so much so that eventually everything just kind of folded into it.
If we think about the timeline, like from the moment you started, where in the 7 years of Todd at the AMA are we? Is this still in year one? Are we later in time, in actual time? Where are we?
We're so far, like sometimes I think back upon like those processes, which were probably like within my first 3 years here, and they like seem like distant memories. Because basically what happened was, I started in 2017, I think. And we had about 3 years of progress together, and then the pandemic happened. And that was a game changer for us and had real impact on not the brand strategy, but how it was expressed. So we had all this time early then. Then my memory is just kind of wiped clean by what happened in the pandemic because we were a very central player here in the States about that and about how we responded to doctors and patients during that time. And then we're in a new phase of the post-pandemic world and trying to get back to solving all the problems that existed before. So if I had to kind of chunk my tenure out, it's in those 3 buckets, and there were different things that we did and learned in each one of those that changed people's experience of what it was with this organization.
Are your brand principles and your target customers still the same as before the pandemic, as after, like after everything shifted? Are they principles that stood the test of time and crisis?
If your brand strategy doesn't stand up to the test of time, then you don't really necessarily have a good brand strategy. And brand strategies, they don't last forever. I mean, I worked at P&G, for so many years, and over the course of time, like, the needs for mouthwash change. And there are new products that enter a category in toothpaste and all this kind of stuff. And so you do have to be adept at adapting to that. But what you stand for is very hard to change, even if people spend a lot of money on it. So you don't want to be in a position where you're changing that all the time. You're either your target audience or your brand proposition. And I think the thing that really showed us that we were on track was when the pandemic happened. We didn't have to change physicians' profiling and patient care, but we did have to talk about a different set of support points that were unique to that situation and unique to the needs of physicians during that time period. That's a thing that my team pulled together with the rest of the organization and really spoke to our audience with one voice about what we were doing for them to get them through this period, which was terrible for, anybody involved in healthcare, very, very tough. And then when that started to, we started to emerge from that, the needs started to change again. Not the brand strategy, but the way that we demonstrated that we were delivering on it. To me, you can have lots of different campaigns, and we've been through 3 in the time that I've been here that are just different expressions of the same brand strategy. That's a good sign.
I love that. I love that you show that this is a foundational set of principles that you're building, and then the way you execute changes over time based on what people need in a pandemic, post-pandemic. Talk to me about streamlining the commerce process, because that is the next point. And it's, when people think commerce, they think checkout. But I think you mean a little bit broader than that. So tell me about what it means, and then also maybe like in the post-pandemic period, let's take the third leg of your stint over there. Like, what does that mean? Executing, streamlining the commerce process. Like, maybe you can give example of more like an execution play, but maybe like step back. Like, what do you mean with streamlining the commerce process as the step?
Yeah, commerce, it is more than your checkout page, although that's probably the single, that and the other things that act like it are the most important to optimize. But this is where, the Ariana Grande song, Seven Rings, I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it. That all is commerce. So from the moment someone is reached on with your digital advertising, you talk to the right person, that you've said the right things to them, that you've designed an ad that gets them to click through and learn more, that they land on a landing page that has 1 line and 3 bullet points and gets them to hit buy now or pick a product out, find out more about it, gets them into the commerce funnel, allows them to handle that without any friction whatsoever. Auto pay out the door on its way to your house. Welcome to the world of digital commerce. All of those different pieces of that puzzle are handled by different groups in an organization. And that's where experience and having a CX team or a chief experience officer really matters, to be able to knit that into one fluid moment, because people on the outside don't care about your departments and your business units. They just want to pay you and be on their way. And so that's really the hard part of this, is figuring out how to make the connections between all those different parts and have everybody's accountable for the end product, which is growth. And so did I get more customers? Did I retain more customers? Did I drive revenue in the appropriate fashion based on the strategy of the organization? People really they have to work together to do that in a way that is not maybe natural to organizational structures right now.
So I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it. I can totally see how that plays out in when you're buying a pair of shoes that you didn't need, when you're getting physicians to
diamond
join
rings for your friends, whatever you want, right?
Whatever, right? It's how the world works. I agree. And it's crazy that we have so many different teams that are coming together on that like very, very short 10-second customer journey. But I can also imagine that in an organization like the AMA, that maybe not really is what is happening. Maybe the final decision and then triggering like I'm going to be a member might be like that. But the entire journey of thinking about I need something, I want something, I like it, and then I'm buying it, I'm paraphrasing here, is probably different. I can imagine your teams are organized differently. So what does that look like? How do you make that happen?
It's really thinking about the outcome that we want and working back from that, having a solid understanding of the audience, and then figuring out what goes in the middle. So one of the things that we were missing, and this probably is we're moving into the step 4, which is that storytelling platform. We just didn't have that in place. And it certainly wasn't in place in a way that led to member development. Believe it or not, we used to publish a newspaper here a long time ago. That had folded into a digital operation that was still like in operation when I came here. It was just publishing stories about medicine. And they were sending it out by email, but it was completely disconnected from the membership part of the process. It wasn't even connected to the website. It was on its own URL. When you think about like, okay, my people don't know what we do. The experience is largely going to be digital for people. We need to create that funnel that gets people engaged with us and then allows us to talk about the priorities, the proof, and the people that are involved here. We're going to do that through content marketing and digital storytelling. And that's the beginning of that operation. Just kind of, you made me think about when you were talking before, like physician burnout is a very important term in our world. It connects to a lot of our programs and our mission. And if you were to type that word into Google 7 years ago, we were like on page 10. It's like, the Arctic of the internet. I mean, you're never going to get found there. It's very cold. on page 10. Today, we're number one. How do we do that? Well, that's not luck and it's not chance. It is a scientific approach of content generation and optimization and a real sense of focus that is a huge collaboration between my team and our mission teams that work on those topics. And then just concerted effort to bundle and promote that work in the appropriate ways and to advance that forward. And that, that particular team that is responsible for the site strategy, content development, social promotion, they're a machine. There's nothing that makes me more proud than to take their dashboard, the way that they look at their results every month, and show other people at the organization. This is the science of how content marketing works. It's not just a chance operation. It is very, very, purposeful in how it's done, and it has demonstrable results.
What are the other teams that are involved right now in this end-to-end journey, other than folks in marketing? As a chief customer or chief experience officer, you oversee many parts of the organization, but not all. Who are involved under your remit, and who do you need outside of your direct reporting line?
So on my side, this is where I was very lucky to get this unified, where the digital platform and all of the content development, our direct marketing and analytics team, the creative team as part of that, and customer service all together. And then we have another group that basically is we call them our sections. They're part of the policy making structure of the organization. So the voice of a lot of members that we can tap into and, wrap that all up. And you've got an end-to-end customer experience team right there. The part that is outside of that purview are our mission teams. And so they're the people that are actually creating the programs and doing the work. And it's our job to expose that work and the great things they're accomplishing to the widest qualified audience possible, and to leverage their achievements as proof of what the organization is, so that we can build our brand strength and drive membership from there.
And thank you for helping me swap out the streamlining the commerce process and building a strong storytelling platform a little bit. So we're doing
Sorry, I pushed you along. I have more to say on the commerce process too, but we can go on if you'd like.
No, please. What else did we miss? What do you want to tell?
I cut my teeth on digital commerce at my prior job in horse racing. And specifically, we launched a premium content product, and we also launched a betting platform with an outside partner. And that was really the first exposure I had to not acquisition of audience, but acquisition of buyers, and really thinking through how the process works to acquire and retain customers. And I got to see, just from the ground up, how that worked. And everything from what I just see constantly, we have had issues and been working on it, but I just saw my wife can't log into her Starbucks app. I tried to sign up for something on Substack and I can't log in. People can't even get you beyond login. I mean, what year is it, right? So these are typical problems in commerce. And I remember we had a thing that's not dissimilar to, right now, you can't join the AMA unless you're a physician, resident, or medical student. We've got to match you in the database and then you can kind of go on. But when I was in this other business, we tried to make people match their customer record in our operation before we would let them sign up for the betting platform. And guess what happened? Nobody signed up. It's how frustrating. So I started learning this is how you streamline this process. And I can quantitatively show how changing this step results in greater business on the other end of that. And then you just start to get more sophisticated with it. I talk about it in the book. I went to a dinner with the co-founders of Stripe, the Collison brothers, and I asked them for a bit of advice for my book. And not surprisingly, I think it was Patrick Collison said, fix your checkout page. And the next day I came into the office and we were talking about this trouble we were having, and the metrics on this particular thing we were doing weren't working. And after a little, several days or weeks or whatever it was, somebody figured out the link's broken. So on the upsell thing. And I'm like, this is what I mean. We've spent so much time and energy on new features for this product and building this thing out. How did we not know that the upsell link was broken. Like what's wrong with our process that we didn't know that? And we've since instituted some things to take care of that, which we can talk about later.
So this is also part of like a test and learn culture, I can imagine, because some of these things emerge from the testing and learning. It works, you want to implement it, and then you don't think about QAing it or bringing in end-to-end test to make sure the links are working. How would this relate? Or do you want to talk about streamlining the process a little bit more? Because I think like the test and learn, the attitude is there. I see it in many organizations, but establishing it is one thing. But coming from a customer experience perspective is unusual. Usually it sits in marketing, it sits in growth, or it sits in the product organization, right? Ship things, break things, and that's fine. But in the customer experience organization, it's lesser known. Like, how would you talk to CX leaders out there that like the principle?
Yeah, I just saw a panel yesterday. There's like so much art. There's nothing that incites a riot among customer experience people as to where CX should fit in an operation. And there are people that are like, oh, it should be in operations, or it should be in marketing. It should be separate. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like I have such limited patience for this argument. I think it really depends on where the energy in the organization is to translate the things you learn into practice. And to me, that's the greatest thing, is that we have built an organization where we can learn things, but most importantly, take action based on them, because the team is unified enough that if I learn that X and so page is not working, I don't have to go outside, enter someone else's queue, and wait too much for that fix to be made. Like, this is what I mean about unifying the growth levers.
Right. So what you're saying actually is like, this is a sign that CX is actually not our silo, which is supposed to be a horizontal layer across different teams, taking the customer perspective. But if you need to wait in your delivery train or in line to get something done, like, welcome, you're in the silo.
Yeah, we still have that. You know, there are certain kind of products that we have that are in our portfolio where, you know, the tech is different part of the organization and they have their own queue and their other priorities. And so we do have to enter that way. And it's frustrating, I'll just be honest with you, because we like to move fast and like you can see it there if you can get it done. But that's where structurally you should embed CX where you can make that translation to action most possible. We just happen to have kind of a hybrid setup where it's housed in marketing. And that's one thing that, you know, it allows us to tell the story properly, allows us to prioritize the projects properly, and allows us to get them done and budgeted for. And then we kind of loan ourselves out, the team, to other parts of the organization to work on their CX initiatives. And that's been really, really good setup for us.
Do you think more organizations have like a central CX function that loans themselves out to other parts? Because the silo problem is real when CX is that like silo piece. There's a whole arc and they report only up to the board with their NPS reports. Paraphrasing here, but you get the point. Like, do you think that is the best way, or does it depend on the organization type, how you would set it up?
I think, again, you know, you have to look. I think if your whole CX operation is set up around NPS, then I don't agree with your setup. I believe that the everyday CX operation is about removing customer friction. And you can see it in the numbers. It's an NPS thing, just like our brand sentiment score. I love getting that once a year and watching that. But like, it's not going to tell you what to do every day. So I'll tell you what does tell us what to do every day is we got a dashboard that shows how many problems per number of users that we're having on the site. And when we see that thing start to go the wrong way, we have things in place that allow us to try to diagnose what the problems are and get them fixed right away. That's the faster and most efficient route. So I think that CX should be embedded in an operational unit. Some people define operations differently than I do. I consider myself I'm an operator and I'm in an operational unit. Those are the people that can make things happen. I don't think standalone CX operations fare well in terms of getting funding. They have a hard time proving ROI. I don't need to tell the story of Vero or ROI. I just need to talk about growth.
I love that. So that brings us home to the final point. You already mentioned it. Eliminate friction across customer touch points in your end-to-end journey, not just the marketing side. once all of these first 6 things are in place, this is what you can do? Or can we start doing this already? Because I had Steven van Bellegem, one of the famous CX keynote speakers on, and he's also big on like friction hunting. If your hands are tied in CX, you can't do much bigger things. What you can do is eliminate a ton of friction in the tinier parts of your experience, but these things add up. So is this true that we should be thinking about getting the basics right and then start to eliminate friction from all our touch points, from all our journeys? Or is this something you can start right away while you do all the other 6 things? So building the plane while flying.
I think you're always in that latter situation. I mean, things are all constantly moving. I did rename my customer experience director the Chief Friction Reduction Officer, and I just basically set her loose and said, like, let's find the areas of friction, the places with the greatest growth potential, and let's apply our resource toward that. And that's been very successful. Like, the level of friction and a lot of the things that anybody has out there is stunning. And you can just kind of directly tie that. If somebody can't log in, well, you're probably not going to retain that customer. Why? We have one operation where just looking at the metrics differently and saying, like, this group is responsible for the number of course completions. Okay, let's work back. Why? What holds back course completions? Take me back through the journey. That has resulted in like a 50% increase in course completions. Focus on the right metric. Remove the friction in getting to that metric. It unlocks growth. And so that's been the key part of our journey. Is there's so much friction everywhere. The question is where do you find out about it and how fast? And I think the traditional places that we have found out about that, one is somebody contacts you about it and tells you, and that's going to be a limited set of people who are pretty frustrated about it. And the second is, like, if you've got good business dashboard, like over the course of some period of time, and it's not instantaneous, you can see if things move out of alignment. That gives you an indication. That's usually too long. And then the third way is there are new software platforms out there that detect this and allow you to identify trouble spots right away. And keep dashboards on that. They do, it's like kind of automated collection of friction. Let's say somebody is like repeatedly hitting on a button on an image in your site to go to the next page and nothing's happening because you don't know why. And that happens with 50 people, and all of a sudden, there's a red flag that glows up, and you look at it and you're like, oh my God, the only thing active on that image is the button, and people are clicking all over this thing. It's just a dumb mistake in the template. So fix it. And you can fix that problem, relatively quickly. Other ones take more time, but at least I always say to my team, when something goes wrong, hit the alarm, figure out what's going on, make things up that are going to address the problem, get it done. So you got to be able to hit the alarm. And this is like a new set of helpers to help you hit the alarm that is not manual.
Yeah, so these rage clicks, they keep popping up. But how do you keep your teams having a fresh perspectives on staying ahead, keeping the growth accelerating or consistently growing month over month, quarter over quarter? Because these frictions, when you solve them, they will do well for your customers, for your members, but it's not the end of the world that the button is not working. The end of the world is your members start to decline and you're not relevant to them anymore. Yeah. So as a final wrap up of today, how are you thinking about next year, the years to come, but also in terms of like CX as a practice? How would you advise your younger self on like helping your teams stay ahead of the curve? And what are the things that you're excited about continuing doing to make you more strategic about the decisions you make and helping your teams to execute on that?
I mean, to answer your first question about, how do you stay motivated and what am I looking for in the future years? I'm just a person who's motivated by growth. And it happens to be, very beneficial that I find idea of serving physicians who take care of people out there. It's very motivating for me and a lot of fun. And so like I wake up on Monday morning, I'm excited about doing it. It's a good feeling. I didn't necessarily take the role because of that. I took it because I love to see things grow. And if you're like that and you're surrounded by people like that on your team who have that kind of genetically built into them, the process of searching for new areas of growth is like discovering new worlds. Do you know what I mean? It's like a mystery solved. And even discovering bad news, like that thing's broken. Like that's a good thing. Like I fixed it and now it's growing again. You have to be the kind of person who gets a charge out of that. If you're going to be in marketing for the years kind of going forward, like we just want to be on that growth trajectory. I want, this organization to be the most powerful force in healthcare for good and to move medicine ahead and take care of people better. And so to me, that there are always new things to do, new things to take on and new initiatives to support. And, things change. Just elections happen and news cycles happen and innovations occur and pandemics happen. If you've got a good operation, you're prepared for all of it.
Right. And you don't need to care about your monthly NPS reporting document like many of your peers need to. So that was a not so nice joke for some people who are like, no, I am stuck in my NPS hell and I want to be like Todd. I want to be focused on growth, which I think we covered really well today. Todd, thank you so much for joining me and taking a deep dive on those 7 principles from your book and how they played out in practice. I love the examples that you gave. Is there anything for the audience that you want to give to them? And also, where can we find you and reach out to you, or where can they find you?
As you say, if you can, pick up a copy of the 10-Second Customer Journey. You can find it on Amazon or a lot of different digital places online, whatever. But hit me up on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people. I share my thoughts about customer experience and marketing all the time. I'd love to be connected.
Thank you, Todd. See you next time.
Jochen, it's great to see you. Thank you.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Expereience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Daydo, the AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, keep pushing the edge and stay inspired. See you in the next episode.